Let's go to this next part and put it up there on the screen. This is complete insanity and is not being grappled with here in the West. Our gas prices may be going down. We are staring down the barrel of a full-fledged catastrophe on the European continent. European power prices futures are up 1,000% since last year and have broken 1,000 euros for the very first time, smashing records every single day. And literally, Krystal, as you and I are doing this show, Gazprom came out and said they had notified Germany that they would be further reducing natural gas stockpiles to Germany ahead of the winter. The reason this matters is, you may not know this, but the Europeans do not have air conditioning. It usually doesn't get very hot over there. They use most of their consumer and electric power in the winter because it gets cold, and they especially need it for German manufacturing and for everybody else. Now, the reason why is that they run almost the entirety of that on natural gas, and specifically natural gas, which is supplied by Russia, some 60% pre-war period in Germany. To have European power prices spike so high effectively means a recession. There is just, and not like even what we're flirting with, like a full-fledged Eurozone crisis. To have the biggest power in Europe, the fourth largest economy in the world, waylaid by energy prices. Furthermore, France, even though through some idiocy really of their own, and there's a lot to discuss on this, the French Prime Minister came out yesterday and said, listen, if they cut us off, we're probably going to have to go towards rationing. And she's like, if you don't need power, turn it off. Do not use it. So they are already moving to voluntary consumer reduction ahead of a full-fledged shutdown. And the interesting thing behind that is France actually has a tremendous amount of nuclear power. Part of the problem is apparently they've not been taking very good care of their plants. And so some of these plants had to shut down for maintenance purposes and more. And so they've been using more natural gas than they usually do. It was a bit precarious, and they haven't been updating their stock because of the green movement in their nuclear power plants, and that has now led to a crunch there. So again, we're talking here about France, the second largest economy on the European continent, a member of the G7, supposed US ally, especially in terms of our trade. This could cripple the European economies. So you would say, well, yeah, it's worth it if Russia is being crippled even further. You could make that argument. There's just one problem. Let's throw this up there, which is that Russian corporate profits in the last quarter went up 25% as sanctions, quote, hit muted economy. Net income gains despite economic contraction and inflation. Now, even more so, I was reading even more this morning, Krystal, which is that Russia has continued to print record amounts of profit off of oil. So we talked previously about that 100 billion euros that they had made. Now, this the last month or so, they only made 90 billion. Of that 90 billion, 70 billion is coming from oil. Now, the way that they're making a profit on this just shows you the difficulty in trying to quote unquote ban or sanction commodity markets. Oil basically is kind of the same, regardless of chemical makeup from all over the world. So what are the Russians doing? Now, this is from the Wall Street Journal, I'm reading. They have taken their oil, shipped it to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is buying it at a discount to the global market price. Saudi Arabia is then burning the cheap oil to power their economy, and then taking all of their oil and selling it to us at the highest market price. Cool. Furthermore, here's what else they're doing. This is on top of India and China that are buying them. The Russians are also sending a ton of oil via Egypt to the United Arab Emirates. There are now all sorts of sketchy facilities in the UAE where if you drop it off there in the morning, it's Russian. When you sell it, it's something else, even though the sulfur content means it's from Russia. Furthermore, they're taking like Iranian and Venezuelan oil and they're doing like blends and then selling it to yours truly here in the United States and to the rest of the world at a market price. So the arbitrage opportunities for traders in New Delhi, in Beijing, in Sharjah, and in Riyadh are tremendous. Without fail, these people are making untold billions of dollars on top of our sanctions. And who is paying the price? Currently, Russian consumers are certainly paying the price. Russian government is not paying the price. They are continuing to fund their war machine. Putin just signed an order drafting even more people, or asking for more people to enter the military. Military spending is fine. Their war machine grinds on. Our consumers are paying the price, and since we live in a democracy and it's a little bit different the way that our country is structured, our government is also, suffering the totaling effects of an unstable country racked by inflation on top of a European continent, which is, it's difficult to describe, but like genuinely almost 10 times more vulnerable than we are to the effects of this sanctions policy. So the quote unquote united West, because it is unable to actually cut off the Russians from the global financial system, and especially the Russians from the oil markets, is suffering to a tremendous degree. And the Russian war machine, of which we were meant to inflict pain on, is doing just fine.
Yes.
And that's a big problem.
But because we went so all in on our economic warfare against Russia, well, that gave them the green light to use their own tools that they have in their toolkit to inflict a lot of pain and, do their side of the economic warfare, which they have been toying.
I mean, why wouldn't they?
With exactly. Yeah, I mean, by us taking that step, and this is what we always warned. Like these things, when you impose these sanctions, when you take these actions and send in all of this military aid as well, they have an ability to respond. And so they took this as a green light to, hey, we're going to toy with the natural gas supply to Europe. And they have done that. And that's part of why you see these massive price increases. It's also going back to why Zelensky is feeling so much pressure right now, because he's not a fool. He knows that you're going to have a lot of waning sentiment in Europe as they see the tremendous cost that is exacted on their lives and the crisis that they're being pushed into by, Russia's invasion and by the Western response to Russia's invasion. So he has got to be concerned that sort of public sentiment to continue in the direction that we've been continuing is very likely to become a lot tougher this winter as Europeans in particular really suffer with these high gas prices that they are just full stop unable to afford. So that's part of why the landscape is increasingly difficult from the Ukrainian side, and why, we need to have more serious conversations about like what next? What does this look like? Are we just going to continue to ship package after package, regardless of how Ukrainians perform in the battlefield, regardless of whether their maximalist aims are realistic, regardless of what it means in terms of like Europeans' lives, regardless of what it means in terms of famine in the Horn of Africa and these other places that have been suffering as well? These are the conversations that we really need to be having about what comes next.
Yeah, the overall, so I talked about Germany is up 1,000. All of Europe is up 700% in terms of gas for the over the last year, and it's up double just from the end of July. The closer that we get to winter, the Russians are turning off the spigot, they're reducing and dwindling the supply, and this has massive economic ramifications for Europe. Joe Weisenthal, who I've cited before, is basically saying this is a redux of the Eurozone crisis from 2012.
Yeah.
In terms, what did we all learn then, people? Which is that given the amount of collateralized debt and all the other financial arrangements that we have with the continent and our banks and all of that, crises like that don't just stay over there. They will impact us. And also don't forget this, we produce a hell of a lot of the world's liquefied natural gas. They need it more than anybody else, and they are going to be driving that price up sky high, which means higher energy bills, not just in Berlin, but here and all over the United States.
The last thing I want to say about this, going back to the Russian corporate profits jumped 25% as sanctions muted that piece that we had up on the screen. It does say something, calls into question some of the core tenets of like the free market and the neoliberal mindset that Russia's been totally shut off from, large sectors of the global economy, and quite a lot of their, of their concerns are doing just fine. You had profits jumping 9.5 trillion rubles, with the year-on-year increase outpacing the 17% rise in consumer prices over the period. So they're outpacing inflation. The manufacturing sector, which was especially hard hit by sanctions, cut off key imported components, still managed a 44% profit gain. Transportation and storage were up 168%. Profits in real estate and construction surged, as did earnings in hotels and catering, as Russians stayed home as international air service was limited. So just interesting to think about that, the impact here in Russia was the polar opposite of what all our brightest economists told the American public was actually going to occur.
Well, if the audience will indulge me, it validates an economic theory of how I think that countries should operate, which is that we've banked everything on globalization, financialization, and the service economy, but in a time of conflict, the only thing you can really count on is quote-unquote autarkic economy, which means things that you produce for yourself. So what are the Russians teaching us? Commodities are everything. It's all about hard power. It's about internal supply chains. It's about having a robust domestic state, which is capable of wearying and stopping attacks from the outside and choking off all of the areas that you have vulnerable points, like Germany's Russian gas, like our, own foreign gas prices.
Which COVID showed us here as well, very similar lesson.
Have showed us. But anyway, autarky is good.
Showed us.
Yeah. Autarky is good. The neolibs can attack me if they want.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.